Hey guys, welcome back. In my last video, From Chaos to Calm, I talked about two grounding techniques that really helped me when I was facing being unhoused. If you're new here, I talk about dealing with life transition in the midst of chaos. I decided to start a YouTube channel so that I can share my experiences with people in the hopes that it can help them when they're going through their own life transition, whether they're facing chaos or not. Today, I wanted to help you create a blueprint from your life transitions. Whether you know it or not, you actually already have a blueprint embedded. And what we really want to do is get a hold of that and change the codes so that the future blueprint that we create helps us in the next transition so that it actually becomes a growing opportunity rather than a spiraling. So the first step is really identifying what that chaos or life transition is. A life transition can actually be anything from dealing with the end of a relationship, a divorce, having a baby, dealing with a big move. What can cause it to be chaotic is when it's something that was so unexpected. And this chaos causes you to spiral and may even bring up a lot of childhood wounds or trauma that you may not have dealt with. And what we really want to start doing so that we can actually own our blueprint and start to use that blueprint so that we not only start healing past traumas, but that we can use that to move forward and propel ourselves in the future. So, what a chaotic life transition taught me was actually the first time I became aware and really took a look at what was happening in my life. I actually had an identity breakdown. I was a very young single mom. I actually had my daughter in my teens. And I had not realized how attached I was to being a single mom or the title of being a single mom. So when she headed off to college, I no longer had that title. That no longer, for a lot of us, it's kind of like our North Star. It's what we say to ourselves about who we are, and also, of course, to others. And when we have a breakdown and we can no longer kind of have that as our identity at core of who we are, many of us face that identity breakdown and we feel very lost. And for me, the biggest thing is learning why we're so attached to those identities. And that can actually lead you down to realizing what is my blueprint when it comes to these major chaotic like life transitions. And sometimes it just doesn't have to be that deep. It may just be that you really want to change your life and you're just not happy in this moment. For me, I actually learned that the reason that I was so attached to being a single mom and that title is because it gave me purpose. It gave me meaning. It gave me a way to show up in the world. I was so young when I had my daughter. I never really got an opportunity to develop a sense of self and my own identity. I also had a lot of past traumas where I felt unseen and unworthy. And of course, that allowed me to see why I was so attached to it. It, like I mentioned, it gave me purpose. It made me feel seen and worthy, if even it was through another person. So here's what can actually help you when it comes to your blueprint. There's a book called Transition, and what I learned from that book is that the way we dealt with our very first transition actually puts us on a path to how we will deal with every life transition moving forward. So for me, I've been on my own since I was 15. I ran away from home because my home life was very chaotic. I actually was dealing with domestic violence in our home. And I realized that my natural response was flight. When we talk about fight, flight, or freeze, and I believe there's another one called fawn. I also learned how to identify areas that needed healing. So I want you to think in your life, what are the areas that life transition brought up and what is it that you may need to heal? For my inner child, I was 15, I dealt with domestic violence, so I ran away and kind of took control of my life. But even now, like as an adult, I learned that what I really craved back then and for a very long time after that, I needed stability, I needed structure, I needed certainty. And that I needed the adults around in my life to be able to regulate their emotions and to be able to express those emotions in a healthy way, not just with others, but with themselves. When I dealt with my identity loss, I had a breakdown and ultimately that became a depression. I learned that I was a functioning depressant for many, many years, that I was carrying along all this trauma. And now that my daughter had headed up to college, I can actually start dealing with that trauma. When it came to my injury, which caused a disability in my life, when I was 15, I actually dealt with something very violent that caused me not to be able to sit or stand for a very long time. So when I got injured as an adult, I believe that caused a lot of triggers. And not just I believe, I actually went to therapy and together we discovered that it had triggered something from my past. And intuitively, when I was injured, dealing with the medical team, I started to realize that I was healing that. You know, the medical team that came and took me to the hospital after I injured myself, they really looked out for me. They were so compassionate, kind. And the thing was that I never got that medical attention when I was 15. And having that experience with the medical team and experts really allowed me to heal that inner child that really needed that back then. And of course, it gave me that realization that, like, hey, I should have had this back then, but I'm getting it now. It was that same like awareness when I was facing being unhoused after my injury that really helped me focus and take control when I was spiraling. It helped me to start learning to regulate my own nervous system, to create peace in the midst of chaos. I absolutely know that if I had not brought myself to the present, if I had not stopped dealing the way my setup blueprint from when I was 15 years old, nothing would have changed. I needed that awareness. I needed to be able to surrender control. I needed to learn how to regulate my own emotion amidst a chaotic event, something that I had not learned since I was a child. And that was now, I believe, showing up so that I can heal it, become the adult that I needed, and to be able to move forward. So instead of like these changes, taking over me and having me like react, I was now responding. I know a lot of people talk about surrender, and I bring up bringing to the present so that you can heal the past. But if you're thinking to yourself, not this again, not the surrender, it's either because you haven't done so or you still haven't learned the lesson. So after bringing the past to the present in order to heal it, I was actually able to see my blueprint in action a year later. After being unhoused, after those 2 days, I actually ended up with an opportunity to stay with family friends for the next few months. A year later, after being unhoused, I actually was able to get roommates and have a job and start getting financial stability. So I decided to get my own place. And what ended up happening is that I had already put my 30 days notice. We found them roommates, and then my apartment fell through. So I once again found myself unhoused. And I had to move into several Airbnbs. I also had to get like a monthly temporary housing for myself. And I started to get like the biggest anxiety, like, not this again. And I started that victim spiral that I had in the past, and I caught it. The good thing was that I caught it and I was like, we're not doing this. So I had to sit down with myself, like I said, have that awareness about what was going on, knowledge where I am now. I sat down and actually journaled. What are you grateful for and what is different today than a year ago? And the reality was that I was financially stable. I had money in the bank. I was able to afford these Airbnbs. I was able to afford to be able to save for another apartment. I was, number one and most important, I was healthier. When I was injured the first time and facing being unhoused, I was still trying to recover. I was still in and out of pain. I couldn't even really move my luggage. The Uber drivers were kind enough to help me. And now I was able to move my own luggage. So I wasn't only physically better, but I was mentally and spiritually, I wouldn't even say like a year in advance of that. It just felt like light years of where I was in the past. Like I was almost like unrecognizable that I had to think back of like, wow, I've really, really changed, and I have really put in the work to implement that. And that's how I knew my blueprint had really changed. So I want you to design your own blueprint. I want you to grab those lessons, like, what did I learn from this one? What did I learn from that transition? What can I heal from this? What did I learn from this? Because each transition is never the same. You learn, you grow, you adapt. You're actually able to come out of it in a more healed way. So, number one, I want you to have that awareness about what's going on. Like I mentioned the first video, if it's not an emergency right now, nothing is attacking you in this second, you're okay. I want you to have that awareness about what's going on around you. Am I in this moment? Is this a true problem? Meaning, is it an emergency this very second? That will allow you to come into the present. Second, look at it as an opportunity to change rather than to spiral into your old blueprint. Number three, I want you to focus. I want you to take advantage of that privilege of being able to process what's going on in your life. Number four, I want you to have a technique for you to be able to ground yourself, whether that's journaling, dancing, so that you can be in your body. I know that helped me out so much. I also gave myself 1 hour. At 1 hour, I was going to just watch TV and just tell myself that everything was going to be okay. And that actually allowed me to know that this is not an emergency. I can sit here, I can watch TV and have a healthy way to escape those thoughts that are spiraling. What is your grounding technique? Number five, I want you to ask yourself what is and isn't in my control. Number seven, I want you to ask yourself, have I done everything in my control? And if you have, I want you to do number seven, to surrender and learn to build that faith muscle that everything is going to turn out okay because you learn how to rely on yourself. And the proof is that if you're here now, in one way or another, you're able to rely on yourself. You have to own that. Putting in the work, it's not easy. Our brains, our bodies, our nervous system is so used to our old blueprint telling us to spiral, lose control, have that wounded self take over. When I was unhoused almost a year and a half ago, I spoke in my last video how I was 2 days away from possibly being unhoused, and how using those grounding techniques really let me step out of that. What I didn't talk about is what happened after those 2 days. What ended up happening from having that practice of just giving myself 1 hour, it's like an opportunity showed up. I was actually able to stay with a family friend. It wasn't the most comfortable situation for me. I didn't really know the family. I was embarrassed. I was holding on to a lot of shame. I couldn't work. But ultimately, it gave me the opportunity to know that I was being taken care of. That although I felt like I couldn't control anything and I couldn't really rely on myself because I was injured, I knew that there was something bigger for me out there looking out for me. And it was being shown through strangers to people helping me to opportunities. And so many doors started to open up. And I was able to start healing. Finally able to recuperate, find a job, and then find a place with roommates so that I can start feeling like I could financially and physically start taking care of myself. I was able to take that and really start learning what all these transitions were teaching me. From my depression and having an identity breakdown, I was able to start understanding the root of that and the impact that it had through my whole entire life as someone who had been a functioning depressant for such a long time. My injury allowed me to link it to my childhood. The trauma and the healing that I didn't get then, I was not only able to help my inner child heal that, but I was also able to heal that as an adult. Being unhoused was the hardest thing I had to face And now I'm so grateful for it because it just healed so much in my life. Using that awareness, having that focus, and learning to self regulate brought me to a whole new level that otherwise I probably wouldn't have experienced. So, although you're facing something in the midst of it, you're like, how is this going to help me? I want you to be able to use that face muscle that, although it may not feel like it now, take this opportunity to journal and to be able to look back so that you'll have that experience. This is an opportunity and an option for growth. It's an opportunity for you to use this as a stepping stone to allow yourself to start leveling up. Now, I feel for me, for us, it's an opportunity to start living the life I dreamt about. I wanted to start a YouTube video. I wanted to start helping the community. I wanted work that I was passionate about. And now, my day job, I'm able to do that. And doing this is a whole other level of purpose that I never imagined. So I hope that you'll continue to join me. So as I grow, we all grow together. So ask yourself whether you're dealing with a chaotic life transition or something that doesn't have to be that deep. I want you to ask yourself and take this as an opportunity. What is this trying to teach me? What is it trying to show me? And most important, what is it trying to heal in me? I want you to really consider your own blueprint and how you can start taking control to change that. If you watched all the way to the end, I am so grateful for you. Thank you so much for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe.